Welcome to the deep dive on Hoop City with Paul Sir, joined by my good friend Ben Golliver. Ben, we were just talking before we started this the recording of this, but the otherworldly play of Luka Doncic and the hot play of the Lakers, and you said something before we even talk about Luka that I think is every bit as significant, and that is LeBron is sacrificing. And genuinely seems happily so. Like, I never expected to see LeBron throw his hands up in excitement at Luka hitting the free throw for his 60. It's refreshing. I would say that. It's really refreshing.
Well, LeBron always knows everybody's looking at him, right? And I think early on in the season, if we go all the way back to opening night, I don't know if you remember this, the Lakers played pretty well for the opening month of the season without LeBron. But on opening night, LeBron sat motionless on the bench and wasn't reacting almost no matter what was happening on the court. And it really fueled a lot of questions about, well, wait a minute, LeBron's not out there playing. Shouldn't he be cheering his teammates on? Where's his head at? He didn't get a contract extension from the Lakers. Is he pouting still? Lots of weirdness around LeBron. And of course, he sat for an entire month, so all that stuff was allowed to accumulate. And when he came back, they didn't necessarily look a lot better. There were some real questions about, hey, roles with LeBron and Asta and Luka, do they overlap? Can they play defense together? And I think, enough time passes within a season, you start to realize, like, you could be a part of the problem or you could be a part of the solution. And I think for LeBron, he realized, for the first time ever, probably since he was, I don't even know if he even had to do it in like youth ball, he had to take a step back. Luka can run the ship. Austin is a great number 2 scorer. The Lakers actually need him to be the number 3 guy. That fantastic game against Denver last week. Remember, LeBron was diving parallel for a loose ball, and everyone's looking around saying, we have never seen LeBron do that. And nor would you necessarily want him to do that because it kind of risked an injury, right? But he saved the possession, and it was a big-time deal late in that game. And it's just symbolic of the idea that, like, hey, less is more from LeBron right now. Save the energy for defense. And I think the biggest difference that I see with this Lakers group right now versus, groups that we've seen lose in the playoffs these last couple of years, when they get to the late in the fourth quarter, Luka is an assassin. He's a killer. He loves it. He's ready for it. And LeBron, because of his age and because of, the lack of depth and the lack of surrounding talent around him these last couple of years, when they would get into those same clutch situations late in the fourth quarter of playoff games, he would be exhausted. He would settle for a lot of jumpers. He wouldn't really get good stuff. And the offense would, kind of come apart. And they really weren't, functioning very well in the biggest moments. Now the Lakers go into the playoffs feeling like we have one of the best clutch guys in the league. I mean, Shea, I would say, is number 1, but Luka's right there, right? I mean, that's a real conversation. That's a real asset when you're looking at how much parity there is in the top of the Western Conference and trying to win a first-round series. And so it's the right basketball decision by LeBron. It's the right personality decision by LeBron. Trust in Luka. Celebrate his successes. Cheer your guys on the bench. They're going to cheer you back if you dive for a loose ball. It has been a weird season because he's on an expiring contract, but that doesn't mean it needs to be a lost season. Just buy into the team culture and you'll have a good time. And that's the important part. It looks like he's having fun.
It does look like he's having fun. And the guy's over 40. And he's still, astounding for players of any age, but he's, his skills in certain areas in particular have noticeably diminished. Not that he's not effective. It was just that he was so good before. So it is great to see. It's great for the league to have a star of that magnitude being unselfish and visibly celebrating the success of the team. And let's shift over to the Lakers and the success they're having. It's Luka leading the way. Like this last 10 games, what is it? 40.1 points per game. Like, it's just ludicrous numbers. And last night, it was a man amongst boys. Like, he was toying with everybody. And doing it at that weird pace he plays at. That's what we've talked about that many times, Ben, where that slow and steady, slow accelerate to slow, but even the acceleration, it's not blazing by anybody. He's just getting his defender on his hip and he's controlling him. But last night it was down at the YMCA with a really good player, and then the locals showed up and the guy just owned everybody.
Yeah, and one of the locals was Bam Adebayo, who thought he knew what it was to have a big night, and then
Isn't that ironic?
he got a little taste of it right back at it, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah. Well, one, he looks like he's sort of the ball of yarn with the cat. That's Luka, right? You're kind of just
A good point.
playing games with
Great
your
way.
defender, and then eventually, oh, the guy's lost. I would say though, I mean, yeah, you're right. He doesn't do it with the burst acceleration. He's not beating people vertically where he's, flying into the paint for dunks and any of that stuff. He does look like he's a little bit quicker, though.
He
Like
does.
he's turning the
I agree.
corner. He's getting to his spots more smoothly. I don't know if it's just his body that happens to be in a really good place right now. Maybe he's lost a little bit of weight. It really does seem like he fluctuates weight-wise within the course of a season quite a bit. I think he puts it on and takes it off much
Yeah.
faster than the average player,
Yeah.
which could be dangerous as he gets, once he turns past 30 and 40, it's going to be harder to take it back off. But,
Oh yeah.
I think we all learned that lesson.
Man, well, no, just wait, Ben. Just
Yeah.
wait.
Oh, it gets harder and harder and harder.
Oh, it
Okay.
does. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so it's just awesome to see Luka peaking because, we haven't really seen the best of Luka, I would say, since that finals run with the Dallas Mavericks. I mean, remember the incredible Western Conference Finals against Minnesota where he's just hitting dagger shot, dagger shot. He was in that flow state, the zone that all the guys talk about where he just can't miss. That's what it feels like when he has 60 against Miami, and there's just no answer for him. It's the helplessness feeling that we want these superstars to generate for the defense. And for Luka, I mean, he's had great numbers all season, but it really hasn't, felt that way. You feel like he's very good. You don't feel like, oh, he has a case as the best player in the league. But this recent stretch, it's just been him playing lights out. I mean, there was that one move the other night. I think it was against Houston where he went behind his back to split a double at the top. He drives in the paint and just tosses the perfect no-look pass for a dunk, and he does it all in like 1 second. And you're like, oh my God, this is better than video games, And
It really
even
is.
the crowd down in Houston, it's all Lakers fans. They're going crazy on the road, So it has that ability to just break a team spirit, And I think he's done that a bunch to these teams recently, and that's what he was known for at the peak of his Dallas days. And it's just great to see him back there because it's been a while.
It has been, and it's great. Again, I go back. It's great not just for the Lakers, but for the league to have a superstar in Luka emerging again, particularly as we get to the end of the season and with the intrigue of the playoffs coming up. Thunder are playing extremely well.
They sure are.
My gosh, they're just like a buzzsaw. But the Spurs are playing extremely well. Wemby's talking about winning last night. Like he has a monster game. What did he have? 34 and 12. Hit the game winner. Mobbed by his teammates afterwards, as for the first time since 2019, the Spurs are in the playoffs, guaranteed in the playoffs. So now you got those two, but now you got the Lakers kind of creeping into the conversation, being better. Not saying they can beat the Thunder, but they certainly are going to be a topic of conversation. I want to talk a little bit about the Wolves because they're kind of schizophrenic right now too, along with Denver. Those are my two questions. In fact, why don't we go there? My two question marks in the West for top tier teams right now are Denver and Minnesota. Denver would struggle to stop people at the YMCA right now. They just are not able to formulate a defensive wall. They're just sponges. Like they're just allowing stuff happening. What's your take on what's going on there? Yeah, they're missing Peyton Watson, but that isn't the guy you would think your team's success is going to rise and fall on as well as he's played this year. But what's your take on what's going on in Denver?
Well, I think the big hope was that once Aaron Gordon got back, the defense was going to have that integrity, that backbone that you rightly point out has been missing. He's helped. He's a phenomenal player, but team defense has to be played by five guys. They give up too many blow-bys on the perimeter, and then Joker, to me, his defense, it fluctuates. I mean, there's been some years where he's pretty effective, and the advanced stats say he's actually great because he's so good at defensive rebounding and he takes up a lot of room in the paint. But this year, the lateral movement to come over to help or to cover up for a guy getting blown by, the extra effort plays that you sometimes need to make, he's just not making them. And I don't know if it's still a residual of the injury absence that he had earlier this season. I don't know if he's conserving his energy because he's playing so many minutes. I don't know if he just simply can't do it. He's a big guy. It's really hard to move a lot, on defense. And so It's possible he's just kind of coasting and doing the minimum on that end, but it doesn't look right. And so I do think that their defensive problems, I mean, they start on the perimeter for sure as well, but I think they
Right.
kind of start with Joker right now. And you look at their lack of depth and there's recurring injury issues they've had this season. It's put a ton on their main guys playing huge minutes, and that will catch up with you. No, the league is just too fast and the schedule is too tough. Something has to give. And so I think that's probably the issue. The problem, though, is that, if you're trying to go into a tough playoffs, first round series, it's going to be tough, whoever they play. The idea that you could just flip a switch and everyone's going to be able to play 40 minutes and it's going to be a high effort and all that, that's not how it works, right? You got to build the momentum and the habits to get there. I think there's a decent chance they lose in the first round, depending on their matchup. And that would certainly be a disappointing season. We also have to look back at the Michael Porter Jr. trade. Cam Johnson has not given them enough in his spot, and they don't have enough other good players. Like, if they still have Michael Porter Jr., they might be able to survive a little bit of a Peyton Watson, right? Because they have more firepower. They've got a guy who's a little bit more size, rebounding. Cam Johnson out there looks scared half the time. He looks frightened. He's not really contributing. He doesn't really trust his jumper. He's not going to, really do much. I mean, he's a pretty limited role player on offense in terms of, cuts and shots. That's all, 3-pointers. That's all he's going to give you. And so that spot feels like a hole, and that makes me nervous going to the playoffs too, because the pressure's not even up yet and he's already starting to falter. So I'm nervous for Denver. I think the whole season I was thinking we're on a crash course, OKC versus Denver, but I think the Spurs wiggled their way into that crash course. It feels like that's the real crash course. These two young teams with all the depth and all the star power, feels like we're going to get that matchup at some point.
Wow, does that sound tasty?
Yeah.
that is delicious, because the thought of that young talent, the athleticism, like the Spurs are so fun to watch.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, they got to be number one on your watchability for teams you want to see in this year's playoffs, right? I mean, number one by far.
By far, 100%, because the way they play, they have such a beautiful balance of blending their talents together. And when Wemby is on, the alien moniker is so deserved, because you watch that guy. I mean, that last shot last night, I was watching it and I was going, that guy's 7'5", and he's playing like he's 6'5", like literally 6'5". The movement, the skill set, the jabs, the pump fakes, the step, the footwork, everything technically is just superb. And he's 7'5" and nimble and athletic. Yeah, I love watching the Spurs play. I love how they play defense. I love how they work together. I love how they go. They seem to have a good sense of when to go individual and when to play team. They're really well coached, as are the Thunder. And that's what makes it so really, really interesting, I think.
Well, you said it earlier that this is the first playoff appearance for San Antonio since 2019. I don't think we should just skip over that, because if you go back 10 years and I told you they were going to miss the playoffs for like 6-7 seasons in a row, no one ever would have believed it. I mean, Every single year you just pencil them into the playoffs like you would pencil Duke into the bracket, right? It's just they're going to be there no matter what. They'd been there for like 20 straight years. It took them a long time to come out of the wilderness. And I think obviously it's a dramatic, game-winning type shot. They qualify for the playoffs. It's a big moment. But I do think that's why you saw it felt like a baseball locker room when that team clinches the pennant, right? I mean, these guys are jumping all over the court, and they're shoving. I don't think they're going to shove Wemby over because they're like pushing him in the chest. They're all so excited for him. It just was a beautiful scene. And I think it's not only because it's been a journey for Wemby to get here in year 3. He had the blood clot and a challenging rookie season. But I also think it's been a journey for that franchise where a lot of those guys have been there for a really long time. If you're talking about the coaching staff and front office and even an older player like Keldon Johnson, he's been in the wilderness for a long time with this group, right? And so I think that's why it was so satisfying for them. But that's the best part about the NBA playoffs. You can celebrate for one day that you made it, right? But then you got a new task, right? And I think just real quickly on Oklahoma City, they are playing incredible basketball. I mean, the buzzsaw, I think, is exactly the right word. They're still not fully healthy, but it doesn't matter. It feels to me, these are long seasons, right? And the best teams, they kind of know when to kick it into gear. They know when to close. They can see the finish line, so we're going to kick, That feels like what they're doing. And when they really hit sixth gear, I don't think anybody can stay with them, right? So that's really, to me, it's a scary sign for everybody else. San Antonio has given them a lot of problems this year. I think it could be a great series if that's the Western Conference Finals. But everybody else needs to be looking around at Oklahoma City saying, oh, no, we were hoping that they were going to start faltering. We were hoping they were going to run out of gas. And instead, it's going the other way.
It really is going the other way. What I like about watching Oklahoma City, and you touched on it, they know when to go on the gas. I would even put that in the context of game to game.
Yeah.
They really know how to accelerate in a game, that mastery, again, of the flow of the game. They don't let themselves get too far out of it. If they are out of it a bit, they find their way back into it. Then when they get to the fourth quarter, they take control. They just take it up to a slightly different level. They're so versatile and so deep, and their players are in such sync. And I think too, Ben, you have to give, you just can't avoid giving too much credit to SGA and the way he plays. Like, yes, he's so great individually, but he's so efficient, and he's such a willing passer and making everybody better. Like, he's that dream superstar teammate, really. And he's humble. Like, when he hit the shot that broke Wilt's record, you would never have known it in a million years that he did anything special.
Right. Well, not from him. You know it from the crowd, though, because the crowd loves him so much, which is a beautiful moment, right?
Really
but yeah, he doesn't preen. He doesn't do a lot of the crazy stuff. Every once in a while, he hits a game winner and he'll give you a little celebration. But his steadiness and his consistency is what makes them go. It's the foundation for the whole organization. They've built their group around that skill set, just like the Warriors built their entire team around Steph's shooting, right? It's exactly the same thing, or Steph's joy, if you want to put it that way as well. It's interesting. You talk about them within a game. So they know if they get to crunch time, they have the best closer in the league, right? So there's so much confidence for this group now, if they're in the last 6 minutes of the fourth quarter, that he's just going to find a way to do it because he's done it so many times. The other thing that they're really good at, though, and this is a shared characteristic with some of the best teams in NBA history, if you waste your time at halftime and you're just eating orange slices and you're messing around on your phone and you come out in that second half, you're going to get your butt kicked. They're going to run all over you right at the start of that third quarter. And so you have to bring your most focus, your best game, regardless of what the score is, when you're coming out of halftime against these guys, because they will just hit you so fast. And they get a lot of their blowouts. They might even be down in the first half, but they could blow it out at the start of that third quarter. The Warriors, with their peak years, when they had KD and Steph, that was their whole thing. It's like, we don't really care about the first half. We're going to win the third quarter 30-12, and the game's over, right? And Oklahoma City is very, very good at that as well. So, playing them, it's like playing a challenging video game. It's like, okay, don't get blown out in the first quarter. Try to keep it close in the second quarter. Do whatever you can to hang in there in the third quarter, and then pray shit doesn't kill you at the end, right? It's like that's a tough challenge, man. Easier said than done.
Well, easier said than done, and no one's figured out how to do it just yet. So
that's right.
We're going down a stretch run in the West, which is really going to be epic. I'm talking with Ben Golliver today. We're in the deep dive here on Hoop City with Paul Sir. Talk about the Wolves a little bit. Like, there have been now, and I have to admit, I've been kind of in the back of the press room with a bit of a few question marks creeping into the back of my mind about not just the Wolves. They're a strangely constructed team. I think that's fair to say. But I think Finch and his staff, in many respects, have found a way to be functional together. But the question that's coming in, and I think it's exemplified in the last couple of games when Ant hasn't been in there, is how good, like, Anthony Edwards is not anything even resembling SGA at this point in his career in terms of his consistent ability to close out games. He can close out some games, and he does. And here's my specific example, Ben, that I'd be curious about your question about. Trying to remember who he hit the shot against, but he hit a deep fadeaway in the corner. That was against the Spurs, I think, when they didn't have Wemby, when the Wolves won. And Edwards hits a shot fading away, magnificent shot. His reaction was to go over and get in his coach's face and start yelling at him. That was his exuberance, this weird, immature, strange almost confrontational display of that's what I do is kind of what was taken from it. SGA breaks Wilt's record, and it was just another day at the office.
Yeah.
I mean, Edwards, so many technicals and unpredictability. His usage, holding on to the ball, I feel uncomfortable on a lot of possessions. So, and he's really good. He's really good. But is he championship team leading good? And is he the guy that Finch and his staff are going to say, you know what, we got to do everything through him as we get to the playoffs and in the playoffs? Everything's got to run through Edwards. When you've got some pretty competent other players who really do some good things too. And what I've noticed is that with Edwards out, as often happens, Randall has asserted himself again. And McDaniels is more into the flow. DeSunmo has been a great pickup for them. He's really done a great job. But does everything come to a screeching halt too much so to be a serious contender when Edwards is there? Sorry for the long dissertation,
No.
but I wanted to set the table.
Yeah, there's a lot going on with the Timberwolves. And so I think, first of all, I am one of those people who says to star players, be yourself, right? Now, if you need to just make some tweaks so that the guy's not screaming at his coach, we don't need everybody to be SGA, right? We want you to be yourself because the best
100%.
version of you is where you're comfortable and you're feeling like you're authentic. So I don't necessarily want to crush him for some of the demonstrative stuff that he does on the court. Of course, you don't want the technical fouls. So that goes without saying. I think that he and Finch have a very interesting relationship where Finch is one of the few coaches in the NBA who can actually get up in his star's face and understand that his star is going to take the criticism and maybe, give it back a little bit. And they feel like they don't take it personally. And so it's a very unique dynamic. So I give both those guys a lot of leash, and I trust that it's not negative, even though it would look strange if it was anybody else. I mean, I've seen Luka yell at Rick Carlisle when he was in Dallas, and it looked a lot like Anthony Edwards with what you're talking about, but I would not give a pass for that because, it was so personal, so negative, and ultimately, Rick Carlisle leaves as coach, right? And so you know it's not a healthy dynamic. The Timberwolves' whole game plan is we're not necessarily the smartest team. We're not the most polished team. We are going to be more physical than you, and often we're going to be bigger than you. We're going to punish you. It's worked in the playoffs in certain matchups. They beat a Lakers team that didn't have a center. They beat the Warriors, who were pretty undersized last year, and especially once Steph was out, they didn't have the firepower to kind of go toe-to-toe there. They even beat the Nuggets a couple years ago when the Nuggets ran out of gas. Right. They just exhausted them. So they're a tricky team to match up with. But I think that the challenge is for this group, and the number one coaching challenge that Finch had this season was this team has made the Western Conference Finals twice in a row. They're going to assume that they can do it again when they get into the playoffs, regardless of what happens during the regular season. And I think what ends up happening is that they're bored. They've taken their foot off the gas a lot during this regular season.
Yeah,
and I think they built up some bad habits, right? And the idea, Anthony's always going to be able to save us, Anthony Edwards, right? Or, we know we could be more physical than our opponent once we get there. And I'm not sure that's the case. I think there's some really good teams here that are tough matchups for them. You look at San Antonio, Oklahoma City has given them tons and tons of fits. I don't think that they're guaranteed to even win a first-round series this year, and that could be, they're kind of in that same Denver category to me where, they're like a little tier down. And so if you get the best version of Ant, we saw him kill the Phoenix Suns single-handedly a couple of years ago, just with spectacular scoring, but he's not as consistent as SGA, right? The decision-making isn't always as good. And then we also saw at the end of last year's Western Conference Finals, he quit. And so you have to make sure that doesn't happen again. That's the number one goal for this playoffs. If I'm a Timberwolves fan, is even if they lose, I want to see it competitive down to the very, very last second, because if he quits again, then you're going to start to wonder, is he going to quit every time it gets tough? Right. And so that's sort of what I see from the Wolves, but it's been disappointing this season. I think that the door was open for them to be top tier home court advantage type team, cruising, and because they had the pedigree from these last couple of years, but they didn't address their point guard spot, until they got to DeSunmo. And he's not really a point guard. He's more of that defensive energy guy. And so it puts a lot on Edwards to be a facilitator, and he's a good facilitator, but he's not a great facilitator.
Well said. And I like your point about athletes have to be themselves. here's my subcategory of that. When yourself is not necessarily right word isn't appropriate, but when it's not necessarily what the team needs,
Correct.
is you up in your face, then that part of yourself, maybe you want to revisit it and say, I can modify that.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying John Morant go do the Instagram videos. You can just be you. There's definitely
I know what you mean.
there's some restrictions to it, but obviously, you got to keep the group dynamic in mind. But if a guy wants to, jump up on a scores table after hitting a game winner because that's his first inclination, go for it. Have fun. This is supposed to be entertainment. This is supposed to be sports. And I do think Anthony Edwards is a pretty good teammate. You listen to his interviews. He hypes up his guys so much. He talks about Mike Conley constantly. He's always trying to feed, some positive encouragement to Gobert. Jaden McDaniels is like his favorite player on the earth. If you listen to Anthony Edwards and you never watch Jaden McDaniels play, you would think that Jaden McDaniels is a top 5 player in the NBA based on how Anthony Edwards talks about him, right? So, he's a very empowering leader and obviously a very charismatic guy.
Absolutely.
But I'm not saying he's perfect either. I think there's some moments where you could steer the energy a little bit better.
And I'm hoping for the long-suffering Timberwolves fans that they can maybe right the ship a bit and get more on a consistent path so they go into the playoffs correcting some of those weaknesses or bad habits I think you correctly identify that have kind of crept in through the years. I only want to touch on one team in the East because there's something else I really want to get to that you wrote recently about Caitlin Clark, which was outstanding, by the way. But it's Detroit. Cade Cunningham, collapsed lung. Man, A, that's scary stuff. But B, with this fantastic season that they built on last year's turnaround season, to have their leader who has been just I love watching Cunningham play. The blend of athleticism, power, and skill he's really a unique player, but really a delight to watch. And they've taken kind of the best of the bad boy tradition. They're not Bill Laimbeer, thank God, but they've taken that, they've kind of assumed that moniker a bit in their style of play. Bickerstaff, their coach, kind of celebrates that too. But it's exciting to see a team like Detroit, similar to Minnesota, long-suffering fans, be able to assert themselves. So what is Cunningham's status to the best of your understanding right now, Ben?
Well, they said he's going to be out, quote unquote, an extended period of time. They didn't really put a timeline on it. I think the only positive I could tell for Pistons fans is that, CJ McCollum had a similar injury and he came back in like a couple weeks. And when you hear collapsed lung, you think this could be like season ending, playoff ending. Right. Not necessarily. There's a chance he could get back for the playoffs, right? But time is of the essence right now. I mean, we're getting pretty darn close to the start of the playoffs. And you also want him. You don't want it to be a Damian Lillard situation where you're rushing back to try to get into that first game and then something goes wrong. Like you want to have a ramp up period, right? And so I think my concern when I'm looking at the Pistons now is everybody's heard of the tortoise and the hare, right? I'm worried they're the hare, and and it's scary, and it'd be really sad if that's how it played out. But if you're a team now, if you're in the play-in tournament field in the Eastern Conference, a lot of times that group you're around 500, sometimes even under 500. And you look around and it's kind of like, well, 3-2-1 Cancun. What's the point of this? And those games get, pretty forgettable pretty quickly. If you're one of those teams right now, especially if you're their coach, you call a meeting today and you say, guys, we have a legit chance. If we can get out of this play-in tournament and we play Detroit, that team is, I'm not saying nothing without Cade, but they are, fundamentally altered if Cade's not out there at 100% because they're so leveraged on his scoring and playmaking ability. We can beat those guys. They're vulnerable, right? So let's take care of our business and let's make a run. I mean, that's some real hope. So, there's a bunch of teams, in that mix, young teams, especially somebody like Charlotte maybe, right?
Oh, my God, Charlotte, they're scary.
Right. Well, and so now you got a real chance. And I've watched Charlotte lose that play-in game by 30 points every year. I mean, every time they're in it, it's a disaster. So go out there, take care of your business, and then go beat the Pistons, right? And I think that's obviously not what Detroit fans want to say. And my whole family's from Michigan, so I understand. I mean, it's a tough day. Like it really is. but I hope he's back quickly. And then I also hope, this could provide a little spice to that Eastern Conference playoff bracket.
100%. Ben, you noted in one of your articles, and you and I have touched on it, the WNBA finally, after a number of marathon sessions, was able to ink a deal. There's still a couple of hurdles they have to get through in terms of the approval process, but for all intents and purposes, looks like it's done. Looks like we're going to have a season. It's going to be on time, a little hurried. I wouldn't want to comment on how they handled it, but hey, growing pains, it's done. But there's one reason they got what they got, and you wrote about her.
Yeah.
People can say, oh, Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese came into the league. If Caitlin Clark didn't come into the league, Angel Reese wouldn't be the star she is today in terms of in people's minds. Caitlin Clark is Tiger Woods. She's Michael Jordan. She is that transformational player, and nobody has done it better, nor with more class. And of course, I'm an Iowa homer, but it doesn't matter. She's avoided, as far as I can see, the most controversial thing that I've seen Clark do, other than whine at the refs far too much, but she kind of ignored Angel Reese in the recent qualifiers one time. But overall, she's handled things with tremendous grace and poise. You wrote a great article. Talk about your article and what the focus was.
Well, first things first, I hope that was accidental, with the missed handshake there.
It could have been.
It's certainly possible. And I don't think that, from what I understand, I don't think there's huge lingering resentment between the two of them. And they're going to be teammates on USA Basketball for possibly 12, 15 years. So
3 Olympics. It could be 3 Olympics together.
Yeah. Probably a good idea to iron that out, now, but, keep the healthy rivalry too. I mean, it's obviously great for business, and it's obviously, great for stoking fan interest. You called yourself an Iowa homer. I had never been to Iowa, other than driving through maybe very briefly, on a road trip cross country prior to covering Caitlin Clark when she was there. And she's the type of person who'll make anybody an Iowa homer. When you play the basketball with that flair, when you can shoot it from half court, when you're the best passer in the sport, like in your sophomore year of college, you're probably the best passer anywhere at any level, right? It's just magnetic. Now, this deal is definitely a big win, but what really gets me excited is that they did not go down the let's play this out and try to have a real labor stoppage. Let's strike. Let's, potentially risk a season. Let's, put some of this momentum at risk and potentially throw it all away to try to get a bigger win now. They got a really good deal. I mean, in some cases, the max numbers, they're going up by like multiples, right? So players are going to be getting significantly more money. But what I'm so excited about is the next deal they sign, because the NBA had a very similar situation. If you go back to 2011, they had a lockout. They actually wound up having to drag and delay it to the start. The start of the season was late until Christmas. They had to play a 66-game season. And, that short-term pain there, it set up the next labor deal where everybody got rich beyond their wildest imaginations, right? I mean, the league just skyrocketed. They put themselves in a good position so that everybody was making money, ownership is investing in teams, and then the players just got these incredible returns that we see now with $60 million contracts and $70 million contracts. So is the WNBA going to get to that level in their next deal? No. But I'll bet you they're now in position to build on their momentum. Caitlin's going to be the face of this deal coming back. She was named MVP of that USA basketball tournament, and she looked phenomenal. She looked healthy. I have just exchanged a message here and there with her. She sounds like she's in a great place. She put that nightmare sophomore season behind her, last year where she was injured the whole time. Imagine if she, let's just say, hypothetically, she wins an MVP this year, maybe they're in the finals, maybe she's winning a championship next year, what that's going to do for the growth of the sport financially and where this league could be. So the fact that they were able to get a good win now and set up a greater win later, to me, it was smart strategy, and it was in everybody's benefit. And my story about Caitlin was only just the night she made history when she broke Kelsey Plum's record for the most career points in NCAA history. And I was at that game, And, she pulls up from that 3-pointer, one step inside half court, and everybody knows that all the pressure's on, national television, everybody's watching, dozens of media members to get there. Rumors that Taylor Swift is going to show up, bouncing around the arena before the game, that people are that excited. And to have the poise and the feel for the moment to come through like she did. And it wasn't just one 3-pointer. It was 49 points and 11 assists, and to put up 100+ points in a conference game against a good team in Michigan, to just bring your best at the biggest time was so impressive. And it was just one more reminder to me is that she's different. She is special. You're not hyperbolic to say, she has a Tiger Woods-like impact. It's a factual statement. And so now we get to see how this unfolds. I can't wait for the season. Let's get it here as quickly as possible.
Well, and think of that. You're saying that now, and a couple of weeks ago, we were all saying, are they even going to have a season?
Right.
Man, oh man, have they, the management, it looks like the players are screwing it up. They're saying the wrong stuff. They're sending the wrong message. Luckily, smarter, cooler heads behind the scenes were keeping their focus. They full court pressed when they had to get the deal done. Everybody understood, as you just articulated so well, what was at stake. Now the lowest paid player is paid more than the highest paid player was last year.
Sounds pretty good.
Sounds pretty good to me. I think you made some good steps. So, and you've got Caitlin back healthy. You got Paige Beckers, star status, Asia Wilson, unreal player, Angel Reese and her personality. You got all these characters, and you
got expansion too. You got some new franchises. Some new energy.
One in Toronto, and I've had a number of conversations with their president, who happens to be from the Twin Cities area, and so I look now, and like you said, I'm excited about the future. But one of the aspects I'm most excited about is all the conversation that has been there about investment in women's sports is one of the great growth areas for companies to start thinking about. And we had this kind of sputter last year, in spite of the numbers going up in attendance and TV. That's all well and good. But what will it be now? I wonder what the numbers are going to be now for when Caitlin's playing, or when Caitlin plays Beckers, and Wilson against Clark and the Fever. My God. And now the investment that could come in that could accelerate that wealth building, as well as league growth, attention to sport. And boy, do women need, young girls need role models like the WNBA players right now, because of the declining numbers of female participation in sport in general. So they can be a real catalyst for change and good as well. So it transcends everything, but it all hinged on getting this darn deal done.
Well, you said it very well on the macro level, and I would just tell your listeners, on the micro level, if you're anywhere near Toronto, go buy a ticket and watch these ladies play. Especially if you can get when the Fever come to town. I know the ticket price is probably going to be pretty high for that game. It is different when you see it in person, and especially if you've got, like you're saying, young daughters or young sons who are, starting to get into sports and taking basketball more seriously. If you really want to get them hooked, take them to go see one of these games, because every time I've ever seen Caitlin in person, even her first playoff game when she was, shooting like Kobe, 19-year-old Kobe, where, there's a lot of air balls, and it was like, can't remember what it was from the field, but it was not a very memorable night, other than she got hit in the face and it sparked a controversy. It was still an amazing show, right? Like, you're just sitting on the edge of your seat thinking, like, what's going to happen next? And that's the type of feeling that she has and inspires. And so that's why I would say, on the micro level, if you like basketball, you're listening to Paul Sir, get yourself out to one of these Toronto games.
Here's how I describe women's basketball, and it's not even as true as it used to be, as horizontal greatness, because you're not playing vertically at the same level, obviously, but fundamentally and horizontally, it is an amazing game to watch. We had the Canadian women's national team in Edmonton for many, many years practicing. And the purpose of it was the city funded them to come. And the idea was, let's get as many young girls into the gym, watching them practice and play, so they get a sense for what this looks like at the high level. We get local men's college teams to come there and just get their butts handed to them by this women's team. And In fact, the guys would say, "Man, are they dirty?" I thought that's great. Like that. It was outstanding. But it is a marvelous brand of basketball. It's so fun to watch, as you say, Ben. And anybody that walks away going, "I had no idea that it was that good."
Well, and that's another thing that I've noticed with the Caitlin Clark effect is that you had a certain contingent of fans, especially on social media, that would say, well, the women can't really dunk, so therefore, why should I care? And when you watch her shoot a 35-foot shot with perfect textbook form off the dribble with two people in her face and it swishes through, you don't care about the dunks.
No.
It's not even on your radar. Or she's throwing a 75-foot, leak out pass to somebody who's running the break, and it just lands exactly where it's supposed to with the right weight. And you're thinking she looks like Luka, or she looks like Joker with some of these incredible passes that she's throwing one-handed. All of a sudden, who cares? This is a great show,
The highlights in basketball, when you watch highlights, yes, some of them are dunks, but the majority of them aren't. They're still not the highlight play. And I would also add into that transformational impact that Caitlin has is it's a combination of Tiger Woods and Steph Curry to me, galvanizing personality, but her ability to shoot the basketball and literally open up an entire new world to women basketball players, an entirely new belief that you can do that, something that was only for Steph and Lillard and those special shooters. There's a girl out there, and she looks just like me, Asia Wilson. I mean, yes, she's tall and athletic and all of that, but kids can really relate to this. And that's what's so dynamic and exciting about it.
Well, I think they have a lot of very relatable young stars, not just Caitlin.
Absolutely.
The women's basketball is undergoing this shift. I mean, it was always dominated by bigs, or often was dominated by bigs for a long time, especially this current era. You look at the very best players right now, Asia Wilson, Collier, Breanna Stewart, they're all bigs, right?
Yep.
This younger group, though, especially when you're looking at the college ranks, too, you got like Juju Watkins coming up, but you got Hidalgo, Miles. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of all the AZ Fudd. There's a lot of guards. I think there's some Steph Curry influence on that, too. I think you have this wave of all these young women players who are playing on the perimeter and making a big impact because they grew up watching Steph and thought, hey, I'm able to do this. And so the sport, to me, is shifting from an inside-out sport to, it's starting to become more like the NBA, where it's going to be an outside-in sport. It's going to be more of a perimeter sport. I hope the WNBA has their rules keep up with that, transition, because I think freedom of movement, not just being able to bully these little guards and hit them with dirty screens and all that kind of stuff. It would be better for the game if they allow the free-flowing pace and movement, because you're going to see all the unbelievable one-on-one moves that somebody like Paige Beckers can do and some of these other guards who are going to come into the league can do. You don't want them to just get punished and crunched by the bigger players. And so that'll be a small thing for the WNBA to iron out as they go forward. The refereeing in that league is subject to a lot of criticism, but the NBA, they probably went a little too far with some of the freedom of movement stuff, and the scoring spiked up so high. But I think the WNBA is coming into an even more exciting era in terms of style of play because of the types of talents who are coming into the league.
Well said. And on the official side, they have work to do in that league. They really do. But
they do.
Before we go, real quickly, first day NCAAs, what were your thoughts?
Well, it was a harrowing first day because I had Michigan over Duke as my final in my championship bracket, and they both got real scared until the Duke really late into the second half. Michigan about halfway through the second half. Both looked vulnerable, despite their number one seeds. You got some upsets with High Point, and those guys were pretty excited. It was great.
Did you see the kid from their school, his call?
I did.
That?
Yeah.
Isn't that tremendous?
Yeah, that's what it's about. That's what it's all about. And, my dad was excited because I guess the guy who made the game-winning layup, that was his first two-pointer all season. Is that true? Did you see that?
I did.
What are the odds?
Unbelievable. A breakaway layup? Unbelievable. First two-pointer all year, because a big deal had been made. He hadn't scored a two-pointer. Goes in for a layup.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin, I had a feeling, it didn't reflect in my bracket, but there's certain teams you get a feeling about. And I always have this feeling about Wisconsin. How are they going to lay the egg this time?
Oh boy. Yeah.
How are they going to find a way to lose? Because they've done it historically on a number of occasions, but that was somewhat epic. But great for High Point, Virginia Tech. They're tough. I
Yeah.
felt North Carolina was in trouble. They're not 100% anyway. Duke was surprising because you used the term vulnerable. I would just add another word: very vulnerable.
Yeah.
They were not impressive, and I know they're banged up, and that's a big part of it. But I mean, even Boozer looked more
Yeah.
flustered than I'd seen him look all year.
Well, I think it's a reminder he's a 4, not a 5. And I think there's still some confusion when people are tuning in at this time of year to say, well, who is this guy? I think if you play him at the 5, he's going to struggle defensively because he's not the world's most vertical athlete. You play him at the 4, his versatility in terms of being able to step out to the 3-point line, defend in space, that's going to come through a little bit more. And I think Duke really needs that size inside to help him out. Otherwise, they're at risk of being overwhelmed. I think it's very possible. But I would tell people don't judge Boozer based on that game because I think he had the most consistent of any season of any player this year. Just 2010, it felt like almost every time, and he's just a high IQ player, high touch, high feel, good shooter, great passer. There's just a lot to like. So, I look forward to the rest of the tournament unfolding. But I was nervous coming out day one. I was thinking, all my priors are being challenged here.
Well, one thing I did take heart though is a lot of attention's been paid to because of NIL money. Is this going to end the upsets? Because of the differential for low, mid majors to be able to compete. What you see in a 1-game series, you never know what adrenaline, heart, and passion will do. And we had a couple of great examples of that yesterday.
Yeah, this feels like the one sport that's never going to have to worry about not having upsets, right? I mean, it's like, some kid's going to hit 7 threes, somebody's going to get the floorboards, forcing turnovers. Some team is going to, take their opponent too lightly and pay for it. Some coach isn't going to have their guys ready to go. I mean, it's so
They're
consistent.
Kids.
It feels like they are kids, they're not pros, right? Even if they're getting paid a little bit more like pros these days. That's part of the reason why I liked Michigan, obviously being a fan of the football program, especially, but this year's basketball team, they're veteran, they're huge. They were blowing teams out like crazy all season long. But they look like the surest bet in the entire country, probably as recently as like February, or maybe, late January. And they've been struggling recently. They didn't win the Big Ten tournament game. They struggled with Howard in the first round. They had one of their guards go down with a knee injury, and they've really been missing him, LJ Kayson. So
Yes.
it's like you can think, the blue chip, blue blood teams with all the money to spend on transfers and all the best prospects like Duke and Michigan. Oh, they're going to be fine. Well, they're not going to be fine. They got to be ready every game. They got to be ready for an upset every single night.
They really do. They really do. Ben, this has been great. Thank you very much. And I look forward to our next conversation. We got madness. We got the women's madness. We've got the NBA heading down. This is just the best time of year, isn't it?
It is. And the crazy thing is this weekend, no one's talking about it. Kevin Durant could pass Michael Jordan on the NBA's all-time scoring list.
Unbelievable. And nobody's talking about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, we just had Kobe do it not too long ago. We just had LeBron do it not too long ago. So maybe that's part of it. Maybe it's because Kevin Durant's kind of in a weird spot right now with the Houston Rockets. But I hope everybody takes a moment to appreciate that. That's no joke. 32, 292. That was one of those numbers when I was growing up. Jordan's career tally. You made sure you committed it to memory, and now KD's right there after all these years, knocking on the door.
It's really special. Ben Golliver, thank you so much for joining on the deep dive today.
All righty. Take care.